Honda just shared some big news about the drivers at Aston Martin, which is the team Honda will give engines to starting in 2026. What Honda said changes everything for the team based in Silverstone because Honda wants to have a big say in who gets to drive for Aston Martin. So does this finally mean that Lance Stroll will have to work much harder to show he's fast enough if he wants to stay on his dad's team? Or will money still be the most important thing in the tough world of Formula 1? It's pretty clear that one of the safest spots in Formula 1 belongs to Lance Stroll since his dad owns the team. There's almost no chance he'll leave unless this changes sometime soon. But what's really interesting is that there are lots of changes happening with drivers. And Fernando Alonso is staying with Aston Martin even though people thought he might go to Mercedes or Red Bull. Honda has now become very active in deciding who will sit next to the Spanish driver starting in 2026 when talking about this. Koji Watanabe, who is Honda F1's sporting director, said we had many talks with Aston Martin about our partnership starting in 2026. During that time we shared ideas about drivers too, and we both agreed that Alonso was definitely a top-class driver. Aston Martin asked us if there would be any problems from Honda if they kept Alonso's contract longer, and we talked about this situation at different times, but Honda didn't make any special requests about this matter. Anyway, we should naturally talk about what kind of driver lineup we need to win. What Watanabe is quietly trying to tell Aston Martin is that even though they understand the father-son relationship between Lawrence and Lance, they won't put up with poor results from the Canadian driver. Lance has been seen as a spoiled driver who can get away with anything in the race. Even his angry outbursts toward his racing engineers that were called embarrassing by a professional athlete. Either way, there will be lots of growing pressure not only on Lawrence to fix the attitude his son races with, but also on Lance. Now that Honda comes in with all this championship-winning experience, they're going to want nothing less than to fight for the top spots in both the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships. But that's pretty much impossible to do with just one good driver. Unless you're Max Verstappen and you're 20 seconds ahead of everyone else. That's kind of hard to imagine for Aston Martin starting in 2026. Considering they have a lot of catching up to do just to get back to podium positions. Even so, Honda isn't just any ordinary team, and looking at their past, they take really good care of their academy drivers. One of them is Yuki Tsunoda, who has finally started to show the talent that the Japanese companies saw in him, but it took a couple of years to bring it out on the track. But with the growing pressure in the Red Bull family and with Liam Lawson really wanting to get in after the 5 races he showed in 2023, where he won 3 of the races that both he and Tsunoda finished, it's pretty clear that Honda will try to get him a better seat starting in 2026, which will definitely be Aston Martin. This is where a problem can happen because Lawrence Stroll has said it loud and clear, as long as I'm the leader of this team, Lance will have a seat no matter how he performs. This is what made many investors back out of a possible relationship with Aston Martin, but the ones who stayed, like Aramco, are more than eager to work together more, even to the point of buying a big chunk of the Silverstone-based team. Many reports said that Lawrence is willing to give up a controlling share of the leadership because he's been pushed by the main car factory back in England to cover up losses in other areas. But Aramco is more likely to agree with Honda than with Lawrence. So all in all, the situation doesn't look very good for Lance once 2026 comes around, whether or not Aramco steps in as an even bigger partner of Aston Martin. On the other hand, if you think that Honda doesn't have a say in choosing drivers at Aston Martin, we should remind you that Alonso decided to keep working with the Silverstone-based team only after he talked with Honda and after the Japanese team convinced him of the success they would bring to his team. This was thanks to the experience they gained from Red Bull's championship-winning years that will likely continue in the next 2 seasons. This is something that, while being seen as a blessing for Aston Martin because their independence from Mercedes continues in a straight line, it's also a curse for Lawrence Stroll. He knows there's almost no chance for him to actually see his son perform better than Alonso or whoever will take over from the Spaniard once he decides he's had enough. This is mostly because of the environment he created for him to succeed in. Earlier this year, Yuki Tsunoda was asked about a possible move to Aston Martin along with the team that literally brought him to Formula 1, and his answer was quite careful. I have a contract with Red Bull and Racing Bulls right now, so I have to respect that contract. It was the same story from Helmut Marko as well, who said that if Honda wanted to take Tsunoda with them, they would have to talk to the Austrian team first, because he's the one under contract with Red Bull. But there's a very interesting story happening in the background, one that could bring the 3-time world champion to Aston Martin. Koji Watanabe opened up about having Max Verstappen work with them in the future, saying that while it's very hard to imagine that happening right after they separate in 2026, it's definitely a scenario the Japanese company will work on non-stop until it happens. Adding to this matter, Watanabe said, I don't think the day of Honda and Verstappen working together will come very quickly, but if both continue their Formula 1 activities in the future, then we hope we can work together again one day. It's a very good relationship, we trust each other, and the Honda workers love Max. We're proud to work together with Max. So we will miss him in the future, but we still have 2 years together and we promise to do our best to win another championship. Together with Max and Red Bull, my biggest memory is him pointing at the Honda logo on the podium in Austria at the Red Bull Ring. I was there and that was a very special moment for me. I was standing under the podium and that day was so special. He always thinks about Honda and says thank you Honda a lot. He shares his thoughts to the outside world about Honda, which is also very important for all the people working for us. Obviously, 2026 is going to bring a massive change to the rules, and for the first time ever Red Bull will enter the season as an independent maker of engines called Red Bull Powertrains that will be badged by Ford, of course. They won't be complete beginners, only on paper, given the fact that they're now working under this brand by borrowing the smart ideas from Honda. But regardless, the Japanese company will take a lot of engineers and knowledge from Red Bull, and the fact that the 2026 rules will focus a lot around the engine and battery power, it's safe to assume that Aston Martin will be in quite a good position to fight for points in the championship. That's why they had this relationship with Honda set in stone, but that's also why they need 2 really good drivers to achieve what they're aiming for. While this sounds a little bit harsh for Lawrence, it's only possible if Lance gets out of the team. We're not saying that Lance can't compete under pressure, we're simply pointing toward the fact that there's no need for this, in the words of his own father, until he's the leader of the team. But once Lawrence starts to feel the pressure from the outside partners of Aston Martin like Honda, then he would have to think twice about having this awkward conversation, where he could send his son to another category to drive for Aston Martin, and leave the F1 seat for somebody who could win races and compete regularly with the top dogs in order to keep the money and sponsors coming. Well, with all this in mind, do you think that Honda will be choosing Tsunoda or Verstappen if they have the opportunity to replace Stroll? And more importantly, do you think there's a scenario where Lawrence will understand how much his son's lack of performance hurts his team to the point of actually moving him to another racing series? Let us know in the comments down below.